Hey, what's up, guys? It is Jack. Today I wanted to go over a more like a recap of what has been going on with Holy and Disc in Legion. This first video is just me about Holy, going over some of the talents, the builds, what the playstyle is like going into it, what some of my suggestions are for talents and artifact builds, and as well as where you are going to spend your artifact power on. So I have been leveling as Holy quite a bit. I'm on the PvP realm right now, so you're already level 110. Everything's already maxed out. But I found that leveling as Holy is really not that bad. You do a pretty solid amount of damage, and it doesn't take too long to kill everything. So you're going to be way more geared than you are right now in the leveling realms, which is like 680, 690, something like that when you start out. So if you're above that level, like I personally am, I'm not going to see it as too much of a sweat. So let's go over first some of the talents and things like that. So there's been a couple of nerfs pretty recently that they just posted on Champ, and I kind of want to pull them up here. So just recently, they buffed the damage for Divine Star, as well as Halo. Just increased damage. A lot of times, nothing too special or crazy about that. Benediction got another buff, so it's now a 50% chance to leave a renew on the target, rather than a 30% chance. Binding Heal got a throughput buff. Pretty solid, but the main problem with Binding Heal, as I'll go on later on, is that it just still costs a lot of mana for what it is giving you. Circle Healing got another nerf. Not surprising, because it's still very, very strong. And just focusing on Holy stuff right now, Divinity got another nerf, or got a nerf, so nothing too crazy. I knew once they had changed how much you're able to use your Holy Words that it would have gotten nerfed, so not too surprising. Nothing really outlandish that I thought would have been that crazy. So, with talents, again, just even though Enlightenment's been nerfed 2 or 3 times since Alpha started, it still is more likely to be your go-to talent in raids, just because of how much mana that the extra 10% can really give you. So, Enduring Renewal sounds really nice, and oftentimes it looks really good, but I don't see it being used in raids. Possibly in dungeons. I mean, there really isn't too much competitive. How much HPS can I pump out in dungeons and stuff like that? Maybe the Mythic Plus stuff we'll see more of, but from my experience, it looks like just a lot of tank damage, and if your people can stand out of fire, you're golden, because you'll be focusing the tank and doing massive pulls and usual challenge mode stuff. So, Trail Light, probably really good on speed kills, very quick kills, parse fights, whatever you want to call it. Quite likely, but for progression purposes, more likely you're going to be taking Enlightenment. Feather, I mean, these are all mobility talents, except for Desperate Prayer. Desperate Prayer got a little bit buffed. So, I actually looked through a couple of my old videos, and if you want to see them, obviously on the channel, of how often I'm actually using Desperate Prayer or using Feather, depending on which one I took for the fights. And I saw a number of fights where I was taking Feather, and I wasn't using it, like, ever. So, I know people really don't like the choice of mitigation or damage reduction or healing, whatever you want to call it, versus mobility. But in this case, I was seeing quite a few fights where I'm really just not even finding a need to run all over the place with Feather, or I'm not even using it occasionally. So I think we might have to wean ourselves off of it and start switching to Desperate Prayer more rather than Feather. I know everyone's been relying on Feather as Holy forever, but because so many of these fights will have a little bit of extra burst damage or have an extra mechanic here and there that could really cause you a lot of problems, it's worth considering taking Desperate Prayer more and more often on a couple of these fights. So, if you can. It really does push your mobility to the limit and your positioning in encounters, but something we all have to work on. Not many options here for 45 talents, just Afterlife being so good, and there's PvP talents. Like Censure, the Chastised Stun is really good in leveling, and that's what I would recommend for leveling. The Shining Force Knockback, it's kind of whatever, Not really doing you all that good. I mean, it's meh in leveling. I like the Stun a lot in leveling. Really, really strong. And then obviously Afterlife. So, can't get much better than that. Now, with Symbol of Hope, again, it's instant cast. Keep in mind. Free spell cast for everybody in all the healers within 40 yards of you. And the biggest thing that people kept talking about was like how much benefit this gives you, and only you, versus Light of the Naru. So Light of the Naru is obviously really good. You get an extra 2 seconds per holy word on your Serendipity cooldown reduction, but it's really just not about you alone. It's so much more about what you are bringing to the raid. Like, utility's been always a huge question in what healers bring. You know, in Warlords, besides Paladins and Disc Priests, everyone had pretty equalish healing during progression. Now it's a shit show, right? So it was just like, well, do you bring Spiritling Totem? Do you bring damage reduction cooldowns? What do you bring? So, with mana being as tight for a number of healers, I really think Symbol of Hope on progression is going to be your go-to. Again, speed kills, parse fights, and stuff like that, maybe you'll start using Light of the Naru. But even still, with how good Prayer of Healing is, and I'll go over that a little bit later, because that's kind of a weird thing to say, Symbol of Hope can really, really be good. Guardian Angel, I don't see this being used too much, but with how strapped you can be for tank cooldowns, I wouldn't be surprised if you'll see this being used, or you might be forced to use it yourself because you'll go into these fights and you'll say, wow, the tanks are getting destroyed. But if I can save him, you know, if I don't need the saving life aspect of it, this can be insane. So, certain fights, you know, situational. Now, this is more or less my go-to build, or my default build. Obviously it won't be the best for every fight, but with Surge of Light, I think Surge of Light just so good in comparison to your other heals, or to your other talent options, just because it's free, and mana is a limiting factor. It's just such a limiting factor now. So, Surge of Light, again, hasn't changed much. Being able to proc it off Divine Star, very, very nice. And usually I'm even taking it if I'll take like Divinity, which was recently nerfed, even though, because Divinity is also a very good talent, but we'll see how good it is after that 5% nerf. Still could be very, very insane though. But Binding Heal, even though it was a little bit buffed, I'm going to give it a little bit more practice, a little bit more of a look into it, but I think it's a lot less about how much healing it does and a lot more about the secondary effect that it does. Because we have a number of heals, and we have a number of different ways to heal stuff, but it's all about the secondary effects, I find, more and more. So how much serendipity reduction are you getting out of it? So I'm really not a huge fan of Binding Heal. The secondary aspect of it is that Sanctify is as a reminder, it's your ground effect. Heal 6 targets for lump sum. It's not a very fluid heal at all. It's not a very flexible heal. Does one thing, you're probably dropping in a melee or dropping in a ranged stack group and stuff like that. It doesn't have an exceptionally big range to it. So if you're taking Binding Heal and you're not using Sanctify on cooldown, and you're not, well, I mean, obviously you'll be using Serenity on cooldown, but then you're missing half of the secondary benefit parts of it. So kind of a pain there for me. Again, Piety kind of goes back to the same thing where Sanctify may not be something that you're using on cooldown all the time on every fight, but it's almost assured that you will be doing the same thing, or that you will be using Serenity on cooldown all the time for every fight, just about. So, and the fact that this is only off of Prayer of Mending casts, not Prayer of Mending bounces. So, that's another thing to keep in mind. Sanctify is just, it's solid. It's great that it's instant cast, and it does a lot of healing when you're in a good position for it, but it has like so many if, then, but statements, so many modifiers to when it is very good. So, again, with 90 talents, Divinity is quite a good talent. I'm still kind of not 100% on which of these I want to be taking more often than not, just because they all do give you a lot of options. Divinity is very good, so good that they nerfed it by 5%, so it's 15% instead of 20% increased healing. Divine Star has always been very good to pair up with Surge of Light, but now it's actually getting buffed in its healing, so it may be that you'd only be using Surge and Divine Star if you're actually getting the healing benefit of Divine Star and the Surge proc benefit. It won't be just to throw it through and get Surge procs like it is in Warlords of Draenor. Halo, of course, you don't need to max out your range anymore to get the maximum benefit. It's just whoever you hit. So that is just one of the big things, and it just gets better and better now. You don't have to worry about having perfect range on stuff. Apotheosis was recently buffed about, I guess it's more of like a month or so, 2 to 4 months, or 2 to 4 weeks. Oh god, 2 to 4 weeks ago. And now the cost of your holy words is reduced by 100%, so your holy words are free. This is super, super nice, especially because it's 30 seconds, so you're actually really able to be using inexpensive heals, like heal, and be able to take a lot more of your time to properly set up your holy words and other things like that. So you're not so stressed to be burning through your mana as fast as possible because your holy words will be free, and because the duration is so long, and a lot of the damage patterns aren't requiring you to just burst like crazy or do any kind of crazy stuff. So it's quite a good talent, but I think it's still going to be more niche. You'll be using it in certain situations sometimes, which is really how you want it to be. You want it to be an option. Benediction, as I said earlier, was buffed from a 30% chance to a 50% chance to leave a renew on the target every time Prayer Mending heals it. It's solid. I don't think it's insane. The biggest problem here with this talent, and then you compare it to Circle of Healing, if we're assuming that the healing done is going to be fairly equal, as it's fairly balanced around, which it probably is, you're looking at when these types of heals do the most. And obviously Benediction is when you have steady damage going out, when your proms are never being wasted, when you're getting maximum value out of it, when you are able to stand still more so that you're not going to be using Renew a lot. And I'll go into that when I talk about gameplay. So with Benediction, I don't know if it's strong enough to be that kind of niche spell, kind of like in the way that Apotheosis is. Apotheosis is this big burst damage and all this other stuff, whereas Benediction would be very, very steady damage, very consistent damage. And Circle of Healing can deal with consistent damage quite well. It can deal with burst damage quite well. It's a very fluid, very flexible spell, which is why it's so good. So it's very hard from a design standpoint for Benediction to be better than Circle Heal unless you make Benediction so strong that it just destroys Circle Heal on certain fights, you know. So that's a little bit of my qualm. But in terms of talents, this is one of my default builds. This is the first 4 are almost completely set in stone. With switching around Desperate Prayer for Angelic Feather on some fights. I want to give Binding Heal a little bit more of a chance, but it's pretty meh. Piety, I think, is very horrible. Divinity's quite good. Halo's quite good. Divine Star's quite good. It'll be a very situational phase. So hopefully Blizz lets us use our, you know, talents on different fights and lets us switch around pretty easily, but we'll see. Going on to artifacts, I wanted to go over the artifacts really quick of what they all do, and then what my preferred route would be. So, going over really quick though, the artifact relics. You have these 3 different little slots. You have a holy, you have a life, you have another holy. These are basically just augments to your existing artifact traits. You don't even have to have like any of these unlocked. So, say for instance, you get a relic which will increase words of healing, but you don't even have words of healing unlocked. Well, it'll still give you that level 1 rank. So it basically turns the ranks from a 3/3 to a 4/4. If you have everything upgraded, it just adds another ring to it. So if you have nothing unlocked, it'll be a 1 out of 4 when you put the relic in. So first, where you start, invoke the Naru. You have a chance to summon a little Naru today just by using your healing Holy Word spells. Actually, no, any of the Holy Word spells. It used to be healing. So you might actually, if Tude is very, very strong, you might actually be using Chastise on cooldown just to make sure that you can proc it. I'm pretty sure it procs off Chastise. I'll have to double check that though. So Follow the Light, increase all healing to about 5%. Pretty standard. Here's where you start having a choice, and I'll explain, I mean, you'll see why I advocate for it, but left side is the best, in my opinion. You get Holy Guidance, Prayer Healings by up to 12%, 3 out of 3, so. Trust in the Light, people really don't like this talent, or this trait at all. I really like it. I don't think it's insane by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's quite good. Just because of the fact that it's their maximum health, not yours. So if you're gripping a tank or something like that, it can be really strong. And it can be hard to do, obviously, but if you're going to be mobile or there's going to be fights with a lot of movement and stuff like that, taking advantage of the Leap of Faith, I know there's a number of fights where you can be gripping other people out of danger and stuff like that, and because there's such constant damage, having it as a hot, it's pretty good. I don't think that this is going to be something where you're forced to use it on cooldown, but I think when you use it enough, or when you try to find ways to use it as creatively as possible, I think it would be quite good. So, it's solid. Now we start getting into the big reasons why you want to go on the left side. Critical strike chance of Holy Word Serenity is increased by 15%. That is extremely good. Because Serenity is really going to be your bread and butter, it's going to be most of your focus from a gameplay perspective. There we go. So having extra crit can be a huge, huge deal. Light of the Ture, again, if you are focusing on single target healing and focusing on reducing the cooldown of Serenity, you want to have Light of the Ture because it is free, has 2 charges, and it is buffing your single target healing. So it's everything you really want. So, and it does quite a bit of healing for free. So very, very nice, especially when you're strapped for mana. Say your prayers. Prayer Mending has a 20% chance to not consume a charge when it jumps to a new target. Very good. Prayer Mending has always been a very strong heal. And if you pair it up with Holy Mending, when Palm jumps to a target affected by your Renew, that target is instantly healed. This is very good, and I know a lot of people talked about pairing it up with Benediction, and I don't think it's super great in that aspect. But what I will say is that you're always going to have Renew on your tanks, and you're always going to bounce Palm off your tanks to begin with, because they're always taking damage, presumably. So it is an insanely good, steady tank heal. But I think if you go to take Benediction, you almost always are forfeiting the use of Renew as a filler, unless you are moving and there's no other abilities to cast, right? But you wouldn't want to waste the benefit of your talent by renewing over targets that could get Renew on them through the talent. So that's where, and people will talk about how Holy Mending's kind of a consolation prize in that aspect, and it's not enough. So Holy Mending's a solid heal. It's a very strong heal. You know, I think it accounted for 2 to 3% of my healing on a couple of the fights, which it's an artifact trait, which is pretty good for an artifact trait, all things considered. Power of the Naru, Holy Word Sanctify increases healing done of prayer healing by 6%. It's pretty solid. It'll actually go up to 18, 20%, something like that. It'll go higher because there's only 1 of 3 right now. But this is a pretty solid heal, and it's not just the next one, but it's as many as possible. So if you get into a high damage phase, or you're in Apotheosis form, and there's a lot of stacked AoE damage and stuff like that, prayer healing will just be absolutely crazy in that aspect. One of the reasons why I thought crit would be an insane talent, or sorry, crit would be an insane stat, was this trait, Blessing of Ture. Critical heals with heal or flash have a chance to imbue you with the essence of Ture, increasing all healing you do by 20%. But they didn't talk about the proc chance. And previously this was worded that critical heals with heal or flash imbue you with the essence of Ture, not have a chance to. So when I saw it, I was like, oh man, if it's a 100% chance, that's awesome. But it's like 20%, I think, on Wowhead is the last time I checked. It used to be 15. So because of that, you have, let me see, in my gear, let's go to critical strike, I have a 14% chance to crit. So if 14 of my 100 crits, or 14 of my 100 heal casts crit, right, then I have a 20% chance out of that 14 casts to get this proc. So it's really a low chance. It's really, really a low chance. So you're getting like 2 or 3. It's just really meh. So, I mean, it's solid, but it's nothing that is going to change the game for you. If they up the proc chance, then yes. But because that proc chance is quite low, you know, it's solid. It's alright. Going back, so this is the left side, and I definitely advocate for going through the left side. Focusing the light is something you can easily skip while Focus Will is active. Again, Focus Will only procs when you're being auto-attacked or you're being melee attacked. Keep that in mind. Holy Fire and Holy Word Chastise reduce the target's movement speed by 30% and increase your own by 30%. Very meh. Really very meh. So, it's nothing special. Holy Hands, increasing healing done by Renew by up to 15%. It goes a little bit higher with your Relic slots. If you want to boost it up, it's okay. It's solid. Heal done by Flash and Heal. This is quite good. It's pretty solid because you'll be casting a lot of Flash and a lot of Heal and stuff like that. All your Holy Word spells get buffed by the 10%. Pretty solid. You know, all of these are very solid. But when you get to Renew the Faith, which looks really, really good. Yeah, I'll be right there, Jesse. while it looks really, really good and everything like that, it doesn't give you enough of an effect. Because we're so used to having Words of Mending being super insane and stuff like that, but it really is, you're not getting as many Prayer of Mendings out as you usually are, so you're getting a handful of extra palm procs per Divine Hymn. You know, and you're getting a couple extra from just forcing it to bounce all the time, and you're getting a couple extra from it not losing any charges. So it's solid. I don't think it's as crazy good as Laetature is. So that is one of the big reasons why I advocate for going for the left side first, just because those are a lot better. Hollow Ground is solid. Cooldown of Sanctify is reduced by 10 seconds. It's just okay. You're not, like I said, Sanctify is not crazy good. Guardians of the Light, this is what people were kind of laughing about as getting your own personal cooldown. It's like, if you're Guardian Spiriting the tank, you get Guardian Spirit on yourself. It's okay. Too often you are just using it on the tank, but you don't need it. Or I guess you will use it for yourself, and then the tank doesn't need it, or something like that. So, boosting up with Relics, I think in general, the safest way to use your Relics is boosting up your single target healing and boosting up your Serenity. Boosting up Holy Words, boosting up Serenity, boosting up Flash or Heal. That's generally where you'd want to be aiming at. So, say your prayers, Serenity now, Reverence, and Words of Healing are probably some of the better ones. Those are probably my top ones. Renew's okay. It costs a lot of mana, and it's just an okay filler for when you're moving and stuff like that. But if you're standing still, Heal is definitely the better filler. And in terms of gameplay style, so many of your spells and spell casts and stuff like that are aimed towards single target healing, just because Serenity is so strong. So for me, the biggest thing that is changing from Warlords to Legion is that you have a focus now on single target healing more so than anything else. Renew is okay. You definitely want to keep it on the tanks all the time. You definitely want to use Prayer of Mending on cooldown all the time, same as usual. But your filler is now a lot more of using heal as much as possible, using Flash if you have to, spending your Holy Words very frequently, using them a lot because they do a ton of healing. You are very much the all-around single target healer, and you're a very good tank healer, but you're not always forced to tank heal. You don't have a punishment for healing the tank. You're actually encouraged to in some instances, but you don't have a punishment for healing the raid. So you're very, very flexible. I had a lot of doubts about Prayer of Healing that I wanted to address really quick, because I remember in another video I said that Prayer of Healing was really dumb because it was the third spell that does the same thing. Because you have Circle Heal, 5 targets within 30 yards, and it's kind of smart targeting. You have Sanctify, which, you know, heals 6 people within 10 yards of the little reticule. And then you have Prayer of Healing, which is 5 people within 20 yards. So it's like, where does this come in? But the biggest thing about this is the fact that it has that little bit of extra smart targeting into it, that it does a ton of healing and has very, very low overhealing. I think it has more of a smart targeting aspect to it than Circle Heal, such that when I was using Prayer of Healing, or I was looking at other Holy Priests using Prayer of Healing in raids, it was so efficient. So when you're able to pair it up with Power of the Naru, so you'll Sanctify, and then you have 15 seconds of a huge boost to your Prayer of Healing, it can be really, really strong. So it's something to keep in mind. I think it's more of meant for high damage phases, and may very well be something that you're pairing up with Symbol of Hope, where you'll be able to say, okay, I can Apotheosis, use both my Holy Words, get them both on cooldown, Symbol of Hope, get them back real quick, bust out my cooldowns again, things like that. So it can be very, very good. So the biggest thing is just, the biggest question as we're going more and more into Legion Beta is, what are your 90s and what are your 100s going to be looking like? I still think Benediction needs a little bit more of a buff, 60-70% range, but I would like to test it out a little bit more. I'm still a little bit on the fence about Binding Heal and where we're standing with Binding Heal, but it's alright. I think, if anything else, getting it a little bit of a mana reduction or getting it a little bit of a serendipity increase would be a bigger benefit, so that it puts it into more of a situational perspective, but that's just me. But I'm really pleased with where Holy's going. I'm really, really happy about it. I think it's giving us not only a niche, but it's also giving us variety in what we want to do. So I think that's about it. If you guys have any kind of questions, let me know, comments or anything like that, and I'll see y'all next time.